Welcome to episode 10 of ASTR, the video magazine that brings together the Adventist Church's past and present in order to inspire for the future. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to those of you who are watching every 2 weeks and have let us know that you're enjoying the program. In this episode, first we bring you the events of this week in Adventist history. Then Dragoslava Santrak and I bring you another inspiring story of missionaries and mission service from the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists. And then Maggie Naira, the editor of the Seventh-day Adventist Yearbook, briefly explores the history of this crucial reference work for the worldwide Adventist Church.
If you've ever wanted to study from a previous adult Sabbath School quarterly, then this is for you. Decades worth of old Sabbath School quarterlies, beginning with issues from the 1880s and 1890s, are in ASTR's online archives at documents.adventistarchives.org/SSQ. That's documents.adventistarchives.org/SSQ. Enjoy!
Welcome to This Week in Adventist History. On May 19, 1895, Chester L. Torrey was born in the U.S. state of Idaho. At age 21 in 1916, Chester married Doris Stewart. They both then attended Atlantic Union College for a year. In 1920, Chester was appointed a bookkeeper at Melrose Sanitarium in Boston, where he worked for nearly 3 years and where a son, Robert, was born to Chester and Doris. The family then accepted a call to India to serve as missionaries in May 1923. Chester briefly worked as assistant treasurer of the Southern Asia Division, and then from 1924 was treasurer of the Oriental Watchman Publishing House. He was elected Southern Asia Division Secretary-Treasurer by the 1926 General Conference session. 10 years later, the 1936 GC session elected him as Secretary-Treasurer of the Far Eastern Division, and so Chester, Doris, and Robert moved from India first to the Philippines, then to Singapore. Chester successfully took on the massive task of moving the division headquarters to Singapore. At the 1941 General Conference session, a new Far Eastern Division treasurer was elected, and the Tories returned to the United States, where Chester took over as business manager of Boulder Sanitarium. However, this post was short-lived, as there was a need in the Inter-American Division, and Chester was appointed its secretary-treasurer in May 1942. While there, he also served as editor of the division's paper, in both its English edition, the Inter-American Division Messenger, and Spanish edition, El Mensajero de la División Interamericana. 4 years later, the Pacific Union Conference back in the United States called Chester Torrey to be its secretary-treasurer, a position he held for 4 years from 1946. Then, at the 1950 General Conference session, he was elected treasurer of the General Conference. Chester held this position for a record 16 years until retiring at the 1966 GC session. He passed away on November 8, 1975. Doris died in July 1986. You can read more about Chester L. Torrey in the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists at encyclopedia.adventist.org. That was This Week in Adventist History. We are very pleased to share with you another story from the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists, or ESDA. This is one of nearly 4,000 stories that can be freely accessed at encyclopedia.adventist.org. Today's story is about Arthur and Eva Allum, who spent 17 years as missionaries in China and were instrumental in leading many Chinese to Jesus. Arthur and Eva, as she was known, met at Avondale College, Australia, and they accepted a call from Dr. Harry Miller, a pioneer Adventist missionary in China, to join him in that country.
Only 1 month after their wedding in 1906, Arthur and Eva sailed for Shanghai. It was a long and arduous trip. Upon reaching Shanghai, they traveled by boat up the Yangtze River, journeyed 180 miles by train, and then spent all night trekking by donkey cart. Finally, they reached their destination, the Shanghai Xian Mission Station, where they would assist Dr. Miller at the health clinic and printing office. The Allums immediately adopted 2 practices that were to have long-lasting effects on their missionary service. They donned Chinese dress and learned Mandarin. This is the most difficult study we have ever undertaken, but the Lord is with us, and we believe He will give us success, Arthur commented.
For a short time after the Allums' arrival, the mission station at Shanghai Xian was the hub of the fledgling publishing work in China. An edition of Signs of the Times was produced, with Dr. Miller as editor, Arthur as manager, and Eva as proofreader. However, it was realized that the facilities were inadequate, and the press was relocated to Xinyangqiu, also in Honan province. At Xinyangqiu, the Allums began experiencing health issues. They both suffered from malaria, especially Arthur, who barely survived his 3rd attack.
Truly, the Allums' life in the mission field was marked with many hardships, although Arthur and Eva rarely mention any of them in the reports they wrote home or published in church magazines. The photo on the screen shows their modest home. Eva once reported, "We would have been comfortable if it had not been for the rats, which took advantage of the darkness to scamper in and out of the bins and then across our beds and up the wall. But neither sickness nor rats could make them abandon their calling to serve China."
Indeed. And so, in 1909, a general meeting of the China Union, which convened in Shanghai, voted Arthur's ordination and his appointment as the first superintendent of the Western China Mission. Arthur longed to move to Sichuan province to begin the work in Western China, but it would be 5 years before he would have that opportunity. He would write in 1911, "For 2 years now, the writer has been under appointment for Sichuan to open that province to the message. But I am unable to proceed because we are unable to man properly the stations we have already opened."
In the meantime, he did what he could to spread the gospel, including traveling with a Chinese evangelist named Louis 8 days through snow and wind to visit a Christian pastor in eastern China. On arriving in the evening, the man studied with him until 3 o'clock in the morning. The pastor chose to be baptized, and through him, many of his friends also became Seventh-day Adventists.
In 1910, Arthur was appointed superintendent of the North Central China Mission, with headquarters at Chiu-Chiu-Kau. God blessed his ministry there. In 1911, he reported that at the close of 1910, we had 64 church members in the North Central China Mission. Now, August 16, we have 104 and expect to have more before the end of the year. These gains were made in difficult circumstances because of violent uprisings. By 1912, it was becoming increasingly obvious that the challenges of working in such difficult circumstances was having an impact on Arthur's health, and in 1913, he and his family were granted a much-needed furlough of 1 year.
In July of that year, Arthur attended the General Conference session in Washington, D.C., where Irvin Evans, the Asiatic Division Superintendent, gave a report. "In the great empire of China, we have undertaken work in only 7 of the 18 provinces," he said. in the western part of China is one province with a population of 70 million, in which, so far as we know, not a foreigner who believes this message has ever put foot. For 4 years we have been hoping and planning each coming year to enter this promised field, but so far we have been unable to send a worker. Arthur and Eva Allum, together with Merritt Warren and his wife Wilma, were within a year to be the first to enter that promising field.
Upon returning from furlough in 1914, Arthur learned that his dream of reaching Western China was to be realized. Soon he and his family were settled in Chongqing, the capital of Sichuan province. In Chongqing, Eva continued to be involved in the work of the church while caring for her young sons. She held Bible classes with women, taught Sabbath school, and led the Young People's Society, the forerunner of Pathfinders. Arthur worked unrelentingly. The first native believer in Western China was welcomed in January 1915, and by September 1916, the membership had grown to 30.
Arthur was not satisfied, however. His eyes were always fixed on new territories further beyond. Now Tibet captured his imagination. He wrote, "Today we have had a new experience. 3 Tibetan priests came to our chapel. We spoke to them about the message and gave them a liberal supply of tracts to take back to their people. This is interesting in that it is the first time, as far as I know, that the message has touched that people."
Ill health intervened in Allum's tenure in Chongqing, and towards the end of 1916 he was invited back to Shanghai to become the principal of the Chinese training school. Shortly after, he was appointed the first president of the North China Union Conference. At this point, the North China Union had a population of 290 million, nearly 1/5 of the world's population in 1917, in which there were only 1,296 church members. In April 1919, Arthur was elected as superintendent of the Central China Union Mission. Eva would serve as the union's Sabbath school secretary. In 1922, however, it became clear that Arthur's health could not be sustained. The China Division Executive Committee voted to repatriate the family to Australia, where Arthur would go on to hold a number of key positions in the church, and where he and Eva would raise their 6 children.
Reflecting on their 17 years of service as missionaries in China, Arthur concluded, "I can bear witness to the joyous experience it is to face life and sickness and threat of death with Christ. After years of trial and affliction, I wish to bear witness to the Savior's love. Christ has been near and dear."
What an amazing testimony. Please read the whole story about the Allums and read the stories of many others in the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists at encyclopedia.adventist.org. That's encyclopedia.adventist.org.
Welcome to a new segment from the ASTR Data Collection and Publication team. For this episode, we will look in retrospect to the start of the annual publication known as the Seventh-day Adventist Yearbook. The creation of a publication such as the Yearbook was originally planned, discussed, and voted at the General Conference session of December 1882. As a result of a resolution, it was in 1883 that the first Seventh-day Adventist Yearbook was published. On page 7 of the 1904 Yearbook, it is stated the first Seventh-day Adventist Yearbook was issued in 1883. From that time to 1894, a yearly publication was issued, constantly increasing in size with the growth of the denomination. Since 1894, instead of issuing a yearbook, the denominational statistics and directories of conferences, organizations, institutions, and laborers have been published in the General Conference Bulletin. it has been thought advisable to issue the directory in yearbook form as being more convenient in use. These directories have become almost a necessity with many and are a great convenience to all who desire reliable information regarding the features of our work which are covered by the reports. So, the Seventh-day Adventist Yearbook has been a yearbook publication since 1904, even during the Depression period and both World Wars, except for years 1965 through 1966 and 1973 and 74, when it was published in 2-year compendiums. The Seventh-day Adventist Yearbook, in its present format, continues to be the annual publication of the World Church that lists all the organizations and institutions that hold denominational status, while also providing the most recent available mid-year statistics on population and the number of churches and members in a particular church organizational unit as reported for second quarter. However, this publication functions beyond a mere directory of entities and their basic statistics. The yearbook is a permanent annual record and legal attestation of the organization and provides confirmation of the non-profit status of the church and its sub-entities. Currently, it takes from 6 to 9 months to publish the yearbook. This involves collecting, entering into the yearbook database, organizing, proofing, laying out, and printing the data for the yearbook. The World Church divisions, unions, and institutions are all contacted by mid-year prior to the year of publication. And while every effort is made to have the most updated information printed, as in 1883, there is a cutoff date so that the information can be duly organized for publication. Regardless of the cutoff date to receive the information for the annually printed yearbook, the information on the online version of the yearbook is continuously updated as soon as it is received from official channels around the world. The yearbook is available for consultation online at www.adventistyearbook.org and through the Adventist Yearbook app. Information of how to get the yearbook app for your mobile devices can be found by going to the yearbook website and scrolling to the bottom, where you will find a link that will direct you to the App Store. You can also go directly to the App Store and search for Adventist Yearbook. In addition, you can purchase the most recent yearbook on paperback or PDF format at www.pacificpress.com/SDA Yearbook. To find more information on the Adventist Yearbook, visit www.adventistyearbook.org. That's adventistyearbook.org.
Thanks so much for joining us again on ASTR. Thanks to all of you who have become regular viewers. Join us again in 2 weeks' time for the next episode as we bring you the most interesting and inspiring content from the Adventist Church's past and present. God bless.